Hello, everyone, and welcome to Twillow Talk. We are super excited today to have a special guest with us, Pete Bernard. And as always, I am also joined by my beautiful co-host, Jennifer Jakowski. And I am Tanis Coghlan from Twillow Lifestyle Community, Twillow Lifestyle Academy. And this is Twillow Talk. So as you are probably aware, if you've seen us before, we usually just pick a card. We give you a little update of the weather, energy weather. Today it'll be weather, and and then we pick a card from this deck and we'll have a chat. So welcome, Pete. Would you like to give a little bit of an introduction as to like what you do and who you are, and let people know what you're about, please?
Well, thanks for having me. First and foremost, I really appreciate both of you for doing this.
Super honored.
My name is Pete Bernard. I'm mostly known as a shaman. That's the work that I've mostly done. And in the politically correct 2023, that word's triggering because it doesn't really honor my indigenous roots. We get into that discussion. So they don't really know what to call somebody who grows up in the culture, but they're not necessarily a certain way. So there's people who are bicultural, biracial, bi-religious, bi-whatever. And so they don't really have words for what we do, but a lot of us who kind of grew up coming out of that void of, when there was no culture as much language. So I've been doing healing work for unofficially about 40 years in March. So I've been doing the work for quite a while, and yeah, it's the same kind of work. It's intuitive. It is working with what's preventing a person from really just being themselves. So whether they're blocked or sabotaging themselves, they can't really. The world changes when you bring the best of yourself to the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's basically a summation of everything that we do.
Awesome.
I like the way he says we do stuff.
Yeah. We just do stuff. Yeah. We joke. It's a joke. We go into saying a few things and then we go.
It's just that the work is so versatile. Like some of it's intuitive. You're doing energy healing. You're doing journeys. You're helping a person. It all comes down to none of this works if it's not already inside of you. So you're just helping a person access that, and they will view that different ways. So. Mm-hmm. Some people use the body to try to get there. Some people the mind, other people their emotions. Some people it's their beliefs. So the work is ultimately the same in terms of its outcome for everybody.
Yeah, we just have our own little mix that we throw into it, right?
Yeah, I
in
mean,
terms of energy.
If you couldn't bring yourself into it, you wouldn't do it long term because it would be too rigid and everything. If you're a medicine too, how you express is really important.
That's right. Mm-hmm. For sure.
That's one thing I know I like to say to clients very early on, right, is I'm not here to direct you or tell you what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to do it. I'm here to journey with you and to just let you know what I see along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the benefit of the work is that when it's done that way, when you're co-creating, it can really shave a lot of time off because, well, people always say, Pete, you do meditations and everybody knows I meditate already. I said, I don't disagree with you, but why do some people Google, how do you meditate? Because you could say something is very simple. To you, maybe it is, but to somebody else, they require some level of introduction to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you plot me into a calculus class, I'm not going to do well. I'm going to need the intro too. So
I'm going to need more than intro to calculus.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Math's not my strong suit.
Yeah, so for us, our strong suit is being able to go into that world that's not tangible and to just be able to interact with it. It's just so very common nature for us. Whereas for other people, life is very literal.
Yeah.
It's trying to use your mind or logic to kind of make everything happen. And it's really slow moving that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find quantum healing is you get faster results, I think, than just focusing on just the mind. I mean, anytime you do like the three different sections, right? Physical, mental, emotional, and energetic or spiritual, I think you get better results when you do all three together, But they seem to be faster results, I think. in terms of recovery when you're doing that.
Yeah, and I think it definitely matters to people because you don't want to spend half of your life fixing the other half. I mean, that is the analogy for humans, right? It's like
It is.
it's going to take you 20 years to heal something that you've had for 20 years, and the math isn't good.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, definitely. So just going to bring up a few people here and say hello. So we've got Pogo Pogo. Hello. Thank you for joining us. And this is Jacqueline Richards, and she's saying,
Oh, hey,
Yahoo. Hey, Jack.
Hi, Jackie.
Hello, Ocean Garnet. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you here. And we have a whole bunch of others that are watching as well. Feel free to join us in the chat. And why don't we do a little bit about the energies that are happening right now? So I know that last week we had an X-class solar storm. So those always impact us here on Earth, depending what's going on. And we certainly had some stuff in the Schumann, but I know there's some talk about what actually created that and all that. So what's your take on what's happening with the energy right now, Pete?
I think we are completely ungrounded, and generally that's never good. But to this degree, I have to wonder if it's a catalyst for something else. So when you're not grounded, it forces you into change. I mean, literally, it's like I think all the holdouts for people who have been trying to avoid having to awaken to any degree, who've been trying to avoid healing, they're now at a point where nothing's making sense. And why is my body feeling this way? So I've had people who've contacted me and they're like, I don't do any of this work and I feel horrible. And like, this is not my field. It's not my area. You know, reality is it's just the world's now beginning to react to us, I think, more strongly. It's a very angry planet, even how polarization's always been a part of the planet. It's just stretching things further than it has gone in a while.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the duality thing is always part of the universal laws too. So we have to have the duality, which creates polarization. But I think that certainly is changing the energy on the Earth at the moment in terms of what's happening. Jen, do you want to add something from your human design transits? Have you got those open today?
Sure. It's interesting though. I just want to go back to what Pete was saying for a minute, just because I don't remember how long ago it was, maybe a couple months ago or maybe beginning of the year or whatever. I just had this moment of needing to share about Mother Earth and just the way that we are and the way that we treat her and how, we're guests here on her, and we tend to not always appreciate or take care of. And I think that, that emanates into how we are with each other and the way that we connect and the way that we feel in the world, right? So the transits right now, we just moved into the gate 52. And, when we look at this, it's about moving from stress to restraint to stillness, right? And what that means for us. And so when we think about this idea of, moving from stress and what is stress, right? And what that means for us, like as a collective, because we talk about stress and people will, come to me often, clients and all, about I have stress about this and I have stress about that. But most of the time that is coming from this kind of collective pressure, right? That we're experiencing. And I feel like that pressure has just been getting more and more. And so much about the need to allow that pressure to have its place so that we can understand the triggers and things that are happening within us so that we can do something different, right? And this whole idea of restraint, like we were talking about mind, body, spirit, is a lot to do with, recognizing how we feel it, how we experience it, and being able to kind of take that step back and, not try to resist it, but to allow it to give us the message that it has for us. right? And then being able to find balance between the different extremes and the energies right now, like we were talking before the show, and Pete was saying about, these kind of extremes that we can fall into. And I think that it's so fitting for the transits right now. And so can we move into that? And then that would bring us to that stillness, right? Where we're not trying to force things, or we're not trying to push things in a certain way to relieve that stress, right? And that restraint allows space for that stillness. So that's the transit that we're in right now until actually the 1st of July.
So very much let go and flow kind of energy again, right? The more we can flow with it, the less resistance we have, the less anxiety and all of that stuff that comes up for us.
Yeah, there's an equation I like to use with clients, and it's something I heard forever ago. I don't remember where I saw it, but just this idea that the perceived difficulty of something plus the resistance, or the level of resistance, equals the level of suffering, right? So just paying attention to what we're bringing to the equation and where that suffering is really coming from.
Mm-hmm. I think that, you always talk about being the observer of the emotions rather than being in the emotion or identifying with the emotion. I think that's something that's an important thing for right now as well. Instead of being in the drama triangle and playing like hero, victim, or villain, being able to pull yourself out of that and like look at it from a higher altitude kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we have a couple new people on, so let's just say hello to them. Hello, Miss Moonlight Musing. Hello. Nice to have you here. And who have we got here? Oh, there's just some back and forth. So we got can't help but let go right now. Just ride the wave. Yeah. Jen and I were talking about that today, actually, just riding the wave. Mm-hmm. And depending on your human design, that's your best choice of action. So
right.
Exactly. And we also have Miss Annie. Hello, Annie. Nice to have you with us. Thank you. So, what do you think? Should we pick a card? See what to talk about.
Sure.
Okay. We're getting low on our cards, so it'll be interesting. It's always funny to see what we get. It's always pertinent, but
it will be the perfect card.
It will be. It always is.
Mm-hmm.
This one. Oh, yeah. All right. We got lots of that lately. Grief. And it says, I understand that losing something is an opportunity to appreciate it. So grief is our topic for today. We have that beautiful mandala there. Hello, Twisted Sushi. Thank you for joining us. Awesome. So what do we think about grief?
Well, there's definitely a lot of experiencing grief in the world right now on many levels.
Well, I think we're still processing some of our lost freedoms from when we were in lockdown. I think there's still some left over from that people haven't released the energy of yet. And we've lost a lot of people, it feels like, through various things. I just had a friend today who was talking about how she's going to 2 funerals this week. So even that loss, that type of loss,
Yeah.
What have you noticed, Pete?
I think we're grieving a lot of things, including the loss of our innocence coming out of lockdowns, and thinking that you had people that maybe you realize you didn't really have, and some people kind of finding new families. And I know with the opiate epidemic, a lot of people are passing, so there's grief around that. And it just seems like there's just one cumulative grief after another. And as we know, they all vibrate at the same frequency. So when one of your griefs get activated, they all get activated. That's why it's so heavy, so overwhelming. So you have a chorus singing inside of you. And I think as long as people are not trying to move into healing right away, like there's a mourning period that comes with grief. And
Mhm.
it's not forever, but it's healthy to just be able to sit with it. And I think that ties into our Schumann, that ties into the energies that we're in. It's just people don't want to be where they are. They don't want to be who they are. They want to go back to how things were, and there's no going back. That world is gone.
Yeah.
And there's a grieving of the world that we had, a grieving of we might never have that again. I mean, we're broadcasting, this is your first broadcast since, new legislation in Canada has been passed about a lot of things for, freedom of speech and freedom of everything. So we're grieving that in a way.
Hmm.
It's happening all around you. You can feel it, and it seems like there's nothing you can do about it. And there's a grieving process that comes with all of these things.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's such an important thing, too, to recognize that we're all at different stages of grief for so many different things, right? And so if people are, in anger versus in depression versus in denial, right? Like depending on, where somebody is, not, and we talk about this a lot, right? Like not taking where they are personally, not bringing that on and making it about what we're going through, like understanding, right, that we're all at so many different places on this process, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
And to allow those things, like like Pete was saying, don't rush it. It's okay. We're supposed to go through these different feelings because they have messages for us, and they're there to help move us through, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, for me, I think what I've noticed with my clients is it just comes up for them when it's time, and for myself, these things will just come up, and you work through them as they come up. I think that's the most natural way, to kind of deal with the grief and the triggers as they arrive. So how are you all feeling in our audience around that word? We did have a comment from Annie. It's been heavy, many losses, and secondhand grieving. Yeah. Let's talk about that, the secondhand grieving, because I think that we end up, she says, like, we're searching for the new normal. I think we end up grieving more too because we're feeling everybody else's, all those empaths out there. We're all feeling the collective, and that collective grief can be heavy if we're not aware. We think it's ours, as opposed to thinking, realizing that it's collective. What are your thoughts on that, Pete? The second-hand grieving as a concept.
Yeah, I think it's, when you step back and you look at the world and you're looking at wars that don't really make sense, you're looking at a lot of things, and you're wondering, am I a sane person in an insane world?
Yes.
And in order for me to get along here, do I have to become insane too? It's that story, and you're just looking at environmental stuff going on. You're looking at prices are ridiculous for everything. All of my clients who are elderly, it's make or break where we are, and you're mourning all of it. Like, you're watching it at a distance. It's technically not yours, but you're an observer of it. You're a watcher of it, and it doesn't mean that you don't have compassion for it. And trying to figure out, really, like, having compassion for something and not being sucked into it it's a difficult dance sometimes. And then just taking a further step back to try to hold space for all of it, to see if maybe we can root it a little bit. Can it begin to shift? Can it begin to change? Can it move back towards the center just a little bit? In that.
And I always remind people, best place to start with helping for changes within, right? About helping to do our own healing so that we can send love out. Because if we're not in our best space, then that's difficult to be there and hold space, like you were saying, for others, right?
Like when Eckhart Tolle's talking about being a frequency holder, you know, when you watch all of this, it can really change you. And then
Yeah.
you entrained with that negativity and that hurt, and you end up broadcasting it yourself. So it does basically spread through science. It's
Yeah.
proven. And the idea is like to just be yourself in the presence of all of that, to block out all of that noise and just saying, I'm not disagreeing with you. I know you're a version of reality, but to do your own practices, your own healing, and just say, you know, I'm going to let it in, I'm going to let it touch my heart a little bit, and I'm going to let my heart change it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like
So I think,
transmuting the energy, right? With the heart
yeah,
frequency.
yeah. Sometimes we try to move to protection, I think, a little bit too much, and that takes you out of growth.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I tell people, none of us really know what we're capable of until we're put into a situation. And at that point, you're given a chance to practice everything that you've learned and learn about yourself. So there's a lot of growth in all of this as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we celebrate our own growth along the way as well, right? Because we don't often, if we don't take the time to notice our own growth and celebrate it, then we're not even conscious that we've made progress in terms of our own stuff. And I think we don't, that helps to raise the vibe when you start to realize, oh, I would have been triggered by that a year ago, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That transmuting it, though, I mean, there's such an empowerment to that in understanding our own role in our experience and how trying to push something aside or, trying to repress a feeling or trying to fix it, doesn't really allow that space. And it keeps us in that kind of victim place, right? Of all this is happening to me, and why do I have to experience this? And why does it have to feel this way? As opposed to going, okay, yeah, there's that feeling. All right, what do I want to do with this, right? How do I want to move from this place? And being able to understand the ability to transmute that bring it in and change it and then bring that love back out. That is such an empowering piece to move us from that victim place into, what we're here to be and do in the world.
Yeah, and just trying to move out of that place. Everyone's holding their breath, just trying to wait for everything to pass. Like, you've got to breathe even when it's hard, even when it's yucky and sticky. And like, for all of us, we know this, is that there would have been a time in my life I would have traded every bad thing that would have happened to me for a average life. I would have made that deal back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, like, everything that I've been through has helped me be a guide for other people. So when I'm exposed to their trauma, it doesn't seem like such a big deal most of the time, because you've been there, done that, and you realize, well, if I hadn't done that work, I wouldn't be able to do that. And so maybe this is an opportunity for other people to realize that even if you don't want to formally do the work, you have to do the work because it's still your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't get the option.
And I think sometimes there's grieving for that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the grieving, when we talk about the ego death, right? That grieving of a part of us that we have to let go of in order to move into that next stage. Then I'm right there with you, having had those experiences of, oh, this part of me has got to go. Like, I've got to let it go, and it is fighting to the bitter end, and there is grief in that, right?
Yeah, I remember, like, a really well said point that's so accurate. I remember I met an intuitive one time, and she was like, "Who's the dead gentleman that you're holding?" and described him, and I'm like, "Oh, that was my father's best friend. He literally did die in my arms."
Oh, okay.
And here's me. I'm trained in the work. I do the work, and I'm wondering, well, why did I never really do anything with that? And I realized that sometimes my connections to people are traumatic, but they're connections.
Yeah.
And when I don't want to let go of them, I have maintained.
Oh no.
You froze.
Yeah, just so that everybody knows, we're having some serious storms here.
Yeah.
I have a tornado warning watch, and I know where you guys are
Yeah.
both, there's some serious thunderstorms happening. So
Yeah.
There might
So
be
we
a
may
little bit
be,
of doubt that happens.
yeah.
But there have been a couple comments. Maybe we want to take a look
Yeah.
at those while we wait for Pete to, to
Let's do
rejoin
that.
us.
Let's do that. So we have a comment here from Pogo Pogo. For me, it always seems to be there's someone just standing behind your shoulder all the time, questioning, can I be happy with that heaviness just always there? Both my own grief and universal grief. Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's interesting. This idea of happiness, because it, you know, actually was something it's been a theme lately in conversations that I've had, and this idea of, you know, looking for it outside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's a fear around being happy and what that means, right? Because we're
Mm-hmm.
scared that it won't last, or we're scared that we're going to have to grieve it later, right? As opposed to allowing ourselves to be in this place where it's an experience and it's
Yeah.
okay. And it can be here today and it cannot be here tomorrow, and that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the more that we try to hold on, again, the transit that we're in right now, the more that we try to make it a certain way or long for it to be a certain way, the more grief we have,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because a lot of this is outside of our control.
Well, and there's the connection to grief with lack,
Mm-hmm.
right? Loss and lack. So it is, we
Mm-hmm.
fear having lack, like lacking things, lacking
Mm-hmm.
people, that old abandonment stuff comes up for all of us, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and then the Pogo Pogo's statement here, right? I'm so bad at trying to instantly fix instead of sitting with it, which is
mm-hmm.
needed to grieve properly. And it really is, right?
Absolutely.
You know, we talk about experiential acceptance, and can we allow ourselves in the moment to sit in the grief,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know, you know, like what Pete was saying earlier, you know, some of my biggest experiences in opening and coming to that place of surrender and all started in a place of deep grief,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you know, the number of times I remember laying in my bed wailing into my pillow, just scream crying, my whole body shaking because I had to release things that I didn't want to let go of.
Yeah.
Right? And it, you know, it allows, when we allow that to happen and we don't fight it, it is, as hard as it is, it's a beautiful release.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then we are able to not have to push through, right? But to allow it to have its part of the journey for us. And then from there, you know, we open again as a new person to this experience, seeing it in a new light, because we've been able to release that deep longing and holding on to and all that we had to grieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. A couple of other comments we have here from Hans. Thank you so much for doing this. And we have Michelle from Astrological Tarot. Hey, Michelle. We have Maruda. Thank you for joining us, Maruda. It's great to have you. And being in the moment is best. Indeed. And you have the most relaxing voice, Jen.
Aw, thanks, guys.
Pogo agrees. There we go. And Pam Burton says, sometimes it's hard to sit in grief. For example, you need to move into caretaking mode immediately, but eventually the grief will rise to the surface. It won't go away until you've dealt with it. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's what you were referring to. Welcome back, by the way. I think that's what you were referring to, Pete, about, letting it come up in its own time. And
You think about how much we spend in education, we don't really know how to live. Like, if you want to teach children a little bit of mindfulness to work through emotion, it's considered religion to some people.
yeah.
It's like, these are the skills every human is going to need to deal with anxiety, stress, grief, all of these things. So it's counterintuitive to sit in them because generally you weren't trained that way. It was not something you were taught. was just distract everybody, distract the kids, distract everyone, and just kind of keep moving.
Yeah.
Well, and it's seen as like unprofessional to show emotion in the workplace, or, so you have to control wherever you're doing your release in order to fit in. So just like we're told when we're kids, like, don't cry. You don't need to cry. Why are you crying? So I think more acceptance of that, because we are all human, we all have emotion, and it's necessary for all of us to process those emotions in whatever way is best for us. We're not all criers, of course, but we all have to process emotion, and grief is definitely a big one.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's such an important piece too to recognize, how we do it, because if we all are going to grieve a little bit differently too, I think that that's an important aspect, right? Like, I know I shared, Pete, while you were dealing with the computer
going back
stuff
and forth.
about some of my deep grieving experiences of really just like full body grieving and wailing and releasing, and that was really an important piece for me, but that might not be.
Oh, now Jen's frozen. There we go.
No.
It's okay. You're back. I think I can hear you. You're still frozen, and we can hear you. You're just frozen.
Yeah, but allowing people their process as well, right? And that can be hard, especially holding space, as we've talked about before, for other people to have their process and to not be resistant to that either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it also depends on where people are at in their stages of grief, right? We've got the Kubler-Ross stuff that comes up, where we're all at different stages at different times, and it's not really. I think they've found that it's not really a progression through. We could be stage 3 and go back to stage 1, and then up to stage 5 and back to stage 2. Depending on where we're at. And I think especially when you're dealing with like a family death or something, we have to bring a lot of compassion to that kind of process, because everybody is going to deal with their grief in a different way and process it differently. And some need to talk about it. Some need to be silent and alone, those kinds of things. And so it's important. I mean, just like with society, it's important to not assume that however we do things is the right way, and I think we do that with many things, not just grief, but it's important to know and respect that other people have their own ways of looking at things and dealing with things and all of that stuff.
And that's when the space holding becomes so important, because if an environment allows for something can happen.
Yeah.
And everyone's intuitive. They know when the space is not being held for something, and they also know at that point it's not going to happen. It's not safe to do it here. And if other people are not okay with the emotions, they're probably going to discourage yours.
Yeah.
Or try to distract or redirect or say something that the person's going to internalize later on anyway, creating more work.
Yeah,
it's true. Yep.
Yeah, we never would have thought that the human experience would require so much specialized training just to actually be reasonably good at being a human.
It's true. Yeah, it doesn't come. We don't come with a manual, so.
No.
I always said, if I write a book, it's going to be called "All the Things I Have to Unlearn Since I've Been Born." Right?
Yes.
Because what the world teaches us that we're supposed to be, and what we're truly meant to be, and who we are beyond this are two very different things.
For sure. We have a comment here from. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you're in that protection mode, it's really difficult because your immune system's not working. Yeah. There's no higher functioning because it's not doing that. It's just trying to contain, control, put back to sleep. And for something that just woke up on that level, it doesn't go back to sleep immediately. So it's hard.
That's true.
Yeah.
And grief can be slow as well, like slowly watching your loved one decline. Yeah.
I can
And
relate
Pogo
to that
Pogo.
for sure.
Yeah.
Both of my parents had cancer mostly at the same time. So we did home hospice for both of them, like back to back. And it was from the time of diagnosis and treatment until everything was done. It was about 7 years consistently of just being in
Yeah.
that and just understanding that it has to happen. And, you know, you're respecting people's wishes and you're trying to get through your own thing and you're trying to parent and you're trying to be a partner and you're traveling back and forth and you're exhausted. And in that space, it's like, I want to have grief, but if I do it now, maybe I can't hold everything together. Or at the same time, maybe I'm going to find my humanity. I don't know. So I don't think it's one or the other. It's just sometimes our human moments are not convenient in terms of timing.
Yeah, exactly. For sure.
Well, and again, there's this kind of, as you were talking earlier, Pete, this idea that we have to show up a certain way and that doesn't always, hold space for us to be where we're at a given moment, right? And so being able to recognize that I can be grieving and I can still do what I need to do, right? And I can hold space for both. And yet we find, we feel like, and I've experienced this with clients a lot too, where they talk about, if I let myself feel this, I'm scared I'm going to get lost in it. I'm scared it's going to take over and that I'm not going to be able to find my way back out. Right. And, talking about this ability to allow the emotions to flow means that they're going to come and go.
Yeah.
Right. And even though we're in something and it feels like it's the only place we're ever going to be ever again, that's not really the case, right? Because we're going to be able to flow through and out of. And so, with Pogo Pogo's comment about emotions equaling weakness, I don't think that we allow for the power that emotions have as messengers for us, and being able to really accept that, just as Pete said, like this could be a really powerful, good thing that brings me into my humanity, that brings me into this experience on a much deeper level.
I remember when my mom was passing, I was on the night shift. That's from like 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. So I'm in a zero gravity chair near her hospital bed, which has now been moved into her room. And she's lying there and she's still conscious at this point. And I remember I was laying there and my eyes were tearing, like it was just rolling out of me, but there was no connection to the emotion of it. And I was like, okay, that's a red flag. That's a huge red flag because I cannot feel the emotions that should be going with this. And I remember like, yeah, you have definitely overextended yourself. You're not in a good space right now. So just when the body lets you know, it's like there's something that should be going with this tearing. Because I couldn't call it crying because there was definitely the physical, but there was no emotional. I remember after it happened, I was just the rest of the night, I was like, that's not good.
Yeah.
It's like you need to talk to somebody. You need to do something. You need someone who's not you to just kind of recalibrate you.
Well, and I think that's important for us to remember, and Annie says too that, be aware there's support out there, professional or not, get the help. It's a good thing. So Annie's a nurse, so.
Well, I think especially for men too, and this being Men's Mental Health Month, is that men are 4 times more likely to take their lives. And there's an epidemic of it now. And I can't speak for women, but I am a man and I have male clients and they feel very alienated. And every part of the mechanism, when you say all the regular things, like you need to talk to somebody, you need to do that. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like that is an option. Like even when they do it, it doesn't seem to be a priority for somebody to understand that they're really not in a good space, or that person's just trying to cheer them up. And you can't cheer up long-term depression. You can't cheer up long-term unresolved trauma. Like you're trying to get them out of that particular space. And men's groups are really important. Even if they're organized by women, they're very powerful. Like a woman can go out and do a men's group, and I think sometimes that's what they need, is a woman who understands just the human condition.
Yeah.
It's like you are allowed to have, it's like they're being told you're allowed to have emotions, you're allowed to have an opinion, you're allowed to not know what the next step is. And
Yeah, those are
just
important for
having
men, for sure.
Yeah, so I talk with men. He's like, well, what are you going to do? It's like, well, I don't know. Because you're allowed to not know? Yeah, I totally don't know. Like, I don't have a plan. My job is to be present, and then from presence, maybe a plan that comes, but at a minimum, space holding does, and there's an allowing of a natural process, and those processes get broken down, a lot of it.
Yeah.
So just trying to just say what you need right now is a human moment. It doesn't have to be a completely healing moment. You need a human moment right now. And I think that's what we can have. So understand that you're not alone in this. A lot of people go through it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dare to be vulnerable. Absolutely, Susan. Thank you. And that's so scary for people, right? To be vulnerable. Yeah. There, Michelle says, emotional sensitivity is a beautiful and powerful force. There's a strength in being vulnerable. It is cruelty that springs from weakness.
Yeah.
When you tell a man to be strong, I don't know what people intend. I don't really know what their intentions, but I know how he's going to interpret it. Don't have emotion, don't show emotion, don't go there, don't be there. And because you're not in the one place, the only place that could change your life in that moment is that moment that you're now being told to not occupy that space.
Right. Well, and I found that with in a managing role, you're told not to express the emotion because it's seen as a weakness, or it's seen as something that's not desirable for a manager. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to support the team. Well, that's difficult to do when you're in that vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
And you don't have the support of those around you at the moment, right? Yeah. Community is so key. I'm always on the bandwagon about community and collaboration, because it really is key. I mean, just like you were saying, Pete, with the men's groups, when you get a group of people together and hold space for each other and truly show each other compassion and understanding, it really can change lives. And I'm always on that bandwagon about, find your tribe, get into your community, do the work together as a group, and find that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Vulnerability is, I mean, as Michelle had said too, it does take strength. And I remember even doing a workshop for military and kind of saying, for men coming out of the military who have severe PTSD, who don't want to talk to somebody because that's weak, right? And not wanting to have that space available because it meant that, they weren't strong enough, right? And working on those narratives and helping to, explore that, to actually allow somebody to see you, that takes strength. To be willing to see yourself for everything that is, takes strength.
Yeah.
Right? And being vulnerable is something that we're told is too dangerous. And yet, it's what brings us authentic connection. And it's what helps us come into alignment with who we are.
Yeah, providing the safe space is important for us to be able to do that. And that's, goes back to that holding space that you mentioned earlier. Hello, Gerald. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. He says, my team really appreciated when I showed my emotions. That's awesome. That's good. I think the team appreciates it. I think my experience was that my team would appreciate it, but perhaps the other managers might not. Sorry, I think you must have frozen for a moment there.
Yeah, I froze for a moment.
Welcome
We,
back.
we only heard a syllable. Would you like to add what we missed?
Yeah, I think the idea of what managing used to mean is that we've now realized it's moved into a coaching role.
Yeah.
You're trying to get the best out of somebody, and in order to do that, you're dealing with all of their life, not just their professional life, whether or not you want to. And and if you can do that, ultimately the outcome is better for everybody. But there's an idea of what is professional and what is not, and what is, I mean, when I think about anyone's life, there's where they are right now, and there's this thing that they came here to do, this person they came here to be. They're somewhere either afraid of it, maybe they believe they've tried and failed, and they don't know if they want to fail again. So my advice to you is I'm great at failing. Keep failing until things just start working out. It will happen because the universe works on probability.
Exactly.
And if you just keep doing that, it's a long journey between there, but it's an evolving journey. It's not like everything happens at the end. Every step you get a wing or a feather or something. So in each step, you begin to feel it. But if people are not willing to do that, they're going to miss out on the greatest treasures, I think, of their life.
Yeah. And that was kind of what I was alluding to earlier about the, celebrating those steps along the way to keep yourself moving forward, even though we do the fail thing, right? It's not always just the first attempt at learning, I have to say. Fail, that acronym, first attempt in learning. It's not always a first. It could be, your 10th or your 100th. But we learn each time we do. And really, as humans, that's our main purpose for being here, is to learn along the way and find out what it's like to be human. So,
yeah.
That idea of humanity is such a big thing because it's not the biology of who we are. It is the embodied ideals of what we are and what we can express and space that we can hold and all of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And Michelle says, so true. We're all students. None of us are born with the ability to regulate our emotions. No, that's a bit of a learned thing. That's that programming piece that we get into. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But even this, aspect of regulating emotions and what that means, right? I think that sometimes we take that as we have to control them. We have to only allow them at certain times in certain ways. And we consider that to be the regulation, when really the regulation is, I'm allowing these things to be a part of me and to have these experiences. I'm regulating how I'm responding to them. Right? And that's a very different thing than regulating the emotion itself, right? So when we talk about emotional regulation, I often get that, like, well, can you help this person to, not be so angry? It's like, well, no, anger has purpose, but I can help this person regulate how they navigate their anger, right? And so there's, this component where I think that, again, emotions in general have such a negative connotation in the way that we talk about them, even with, all of this openness about mental health and well-being and all of that. And so being able to, kind of change the way that we're narrating some of these experiences and the way that we're working with them is also really important.
Mm-hmm.
I often tell people if they're afraid to go into it, I said there's a difference between having an emotion and remaining in an emotion.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on here for sure.
Places we pass through, not places we stay.
Yeah. And if we're staying, that's when we need help.
If you believe you're a good person, you shouldn't be angry. If you believe you're this, you shouldn't do that. There's all these rules that somehow came into play by somebody, and I don't think they work for anyone.
Yeah.
No. I think people assume, when you're on the spiritual path that you're supposed to be happy all the time. You're supposed to not feel anger. You're not supposed to feel, resentment or whatever the case may be, grief. But that's not the case. We're all human. We all have our journey. We all have our stuff to do. And, and that Ram Dass quote always comes back to me, right? We're just walking each other home. And that's that.
Mm-hmm.
We're all here to just help each other wherever we're on the journey.
Yeah. It's funny you talk of quotes, and what comes back to me is, and I know I've mentioned it before, but Rumi's quote, "The guest house."
Yes.
Right. And this idea that, this life is a guest house and each day a new visitor. And I don't have it memorized. I wish I did. But just this idea of, an anger, a disappointment, a sadness, right? They all come, and we're meant to welcome them at the door, right? Laughing, because they're here, maybe to clear us out of everything,
Mhm.
but as a messenger, right, from beyond. And the idea of being able to, allow that emotion, exactly that, like it's a guest house, right? It's not our home. They're coming in, they're a guest for a time, they're moving on, right?
Mhm.
But what ends up happening is we go, ooh, anger. I don't like you. I'm going to stuff you in the closet. And then we keep them here.
Yeah.
Right. And we hold on to them. And then anger's going, I have a message. Let me out. And we're going, no, 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 no. And we're pushing it back in. Right.
Yeah.
But then we're walking around and we have all of this anger. And we go, why am I so angry? I keep telling anger to go away. Right. As opposed to, okay, anger, let's sit down. What do you got to say?
Yeah.
What's going on? What's the message? Oh, that? Yeah. Okay. Now I can deal with that, and anger can go on its way.
Yeah. Yeah. Michelle says, spot on, Jen. Being able to feel our feelings actually makes us stronger, more resilient.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Oh, I'm hearing thunder here. So, grief. What else should we talk about related to grief?
Is there a time period where grief should end? We could say it's subjective to everybody, which is true, but how do we make sure that people aren't grieving like 20 years later? Still in that.
That's true. That's a good question.
Yeah.
So in the tradition, that I come from, there's this point where you move in from grief, and grief eventually becomes celebrating.
Mm.
Whether you're celebrating someone that you've lost, or you're celebrating yourself, or you're celebrating something, is how do you honor what was? So there has to be a conscious signaling at some point of, this grief is not something I can remain in. When, and everyone will say it's subjective, which is true, but we don't want it to be 20 years later or 10 years later or a point. So let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you don't want to waste your whole life being in grief when you could move through it with some support, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's that point too where grief turns into trauma, right? Where we've now held on to it and made it our narrative of where we are, right? We haven't allowed ourselves to move through it. And I think that sometimes, we get into this place of, well, if I heal from it, maybe I didn't care enough.
Yeah, then it brings the guilt.
If I let myself move past this, sometimes there's that self-deprecation that happens. And so we hold ourselves in something that was never meant to stay with us.
Yeah.
Or people who believe you should still be in grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they truly loved whoever or whatever, they would still be grieving. I don't think they did, and that's a real thing for people. Like, they just they're aware of it, and they have to work with it.
Yeah.
Well, and when I started seeing the spiritual side of things and realized that there's more after, it certainly changed my view on death. And I think that the grieving process for me has changed because of that. I still do the grieving and I still need to go through those steps, but I do feel for me it's lighter, because it's not like, I think I used to be terrified of dying or of having someone die. before I started my path and all of that stuff. And now it doesn't seem as final. It's like, okay, we're going on vacation. They're going on vacation. They're doing something different for a while, and then we'll meet with them again. So for me, it has changed how you do grieve the fact that you can't see them every day, or that they're not there to, grab coffee with, or if it's someone you're living with, of course, that would definitely be a huge change in your own lifestyle. So you're grieving those kinds of things. So, where it depends, I think, maybe where your grief is coming from too. What aspect of the person's death, where is that grief coming from?
Yeah. I think Pete might be frozen again. But...
I think so. Yeah.
I'm back.
Oh, he's back. Oh, good. So Ocean says, I still grieve my parents to this day. In the beginning, there were lots of tears. Now I understand they're in a good place. No more pain, no more depression. She still gets emotional, but it's just me missing them. Yeah. Yeah, we're sending you big hugs. Ocean Garnet. Yeah.
And I come back to with clients quite often, what is the story? What is the narrative? What is the belief that you hold about this situation, whatever it is that you're grieving, right? Because what we tell ourselves on a regular basis is going to impact how we feel about it, right? And so what are we holding on to, right? If we're holding on to the loss of what we don't have, we're not looking at what we gained from having that experience for the time that we had it. We're looking at the separation as opposed to the oneness, right? We're looking at our own feelings of loss or lack, right? And not to say that those things don't have their place, because they do. But if we stay there, right, we're not opening to being able to have a new experience with that.
Yes, I agree. We are actually coming up to our hour.
Oh, wow.
So it goes fast. It always goes so fast. We have, I just want to say hello to Tam Jeannie. I find that anticipatory grieving helps with closure when the person actually passes. So that's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Anticipatory grieving.
Well, and when we talk about anticipatory grieving too, like sometimes we grieve the loss of people before they're gone.
Yeah.
Because of different things that come up in our experience, and we may have somebody who's very present physically, and maybe they're not present mentally anymore, or they're not with us. And so there's many different kinds of grieving and many different levels of it. And when you talk about anticipatory grieving, the word that comes to mind for me is acceptance, right? And at what point do we move from all of these feelings of of anger, denial, and all of that into that stage of acceptance? And what does that do for us in our own experience, right? That change the narratives that we hold and the way that we navigate, what has happened.
Well, and in that whole thing, you've also got things like Alzheimer's and dementia, where you actually grieve the different stages along the way. So, that's another aspect of all of that, the smaller griefs before you get to the end of that. And, even people with cancer that takes a long time to go through, like you were speaking about, Pete, that can be certainly a long grieving process as they lose their abilities, or, depending on what the cancer is, lose their faculties as they go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's another aspect too. So Pogo Pogo says, oh, where are we? Missed it. There we go. My grandmother. Yeah.
Yes.
She actually felt relief. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so also notice the judgments, right? Self-judgments, judgments from others. Like, when I was talking about, maybe not allowing ourselves to release because of guilt or, shame of being able to move on. And then Pete had mentioned about other people too and their expectations on us, being really mindful of the way that, we allow judgments, our own and other people's, to impact our grieving process.
Mhm. Mhm. We lost Pete.
I know, he kept freezing.
I'm
So
not sure if he's going
hopefully
to come
we'll
back.
be able to have him back again at some point when there's
Yeah.
not a storm happening.
Yeah, we'll ask him to come back for sure. Maybe we can give him a minute while we just talk about some of the things that are coming up.
Mhm.
So we'll just move on from that. So our topic today had been grief.
Mhm.
And I understand that losing something is an opportunity to appreciate it. And, so Michelle says, thank you all for sharing your insights on grief today. Wonderful show. So thank you so much. And a quick thank you to, where is it? Twisted Sushi. Thank you. I appreciate it.
That was great. Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and thank you, all of you, for sharing your experiences. It really does.
yeah,
I love having you all be part of the conversation with us. So thank you.
absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And what have we got coming up, Jen? We have lots of stuff coming up now in the calendar. We have chair yoga every Sunday, 9:30 a.m. with Jacqueline Richards. We have, let's see, this week, Michelle and I are on doing our 7 o'clock show where we're doing free readings. So come and join us for that. And I have another one with Ramsey Chidi on Friday. We have our open mic on Friday, I believe. And then the following week, what have we got going on the following week? Same shows.
And track of weeks. Where are
Yeah, me too. Me too. I know that we have some great stuff coming up. So we have the Know Thyself workshop. We were just in a planning session for that before we came on. So that's Jen and Jacqueline and I are working on that. And we're going to be doing all sorts of fun stuff. It's a 9-week program to really delve into getting to know you, right? You getting to know you. Not us. Well, I mean, we'll get to know you too, but which we're always happy to get to know you too. But it's also about, you getting to know you. That's why it's Know Thyself. That's really our human experience here.
Yeah, and that's going to have all kinds of really neat bits and pieces to it. As a note on that, because we're going to be doing human design incorporated in the Know Thyself series,
right.
And I believe it's next Monday is the 3rd, right, of July?
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
so
it is.
I'm actually going to be on talking about human design with Gerald at 2,
right,
before our show here
exactly.
at 5. So if you want to kind of have a deep dive into a bit of human design reading and what that looks like and learning a little bit more about that, Gerald has been kind enough to ask me to come on and talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So you can do a Tarot Stashes show at 2 on next Monday, and that'll be a lot of fun too.
So that's Gerald at Tarot Stash.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can go and find him. And we also have a channeling class starting next month, which is a great 9-week class. Here we are. Thank you. There is Tarot Stash. Yes, Human Design, 2 p.m. Awesome. And so please join them for that. And then come back again next Monday for Twillow Talk. So, yeah, so super excited. And I'll be on with Gerald as well later on in July. And we have a full month coming. So don't think that it's summer and we're like slacking off. We're all working away.
No.
We're
It's a
bringing
fun
lots of
party summer
stuff.
all together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. I think that we have lost Pete. Please check out his deets in the description below. And he's an awesome guy. Check his stuff out. He's the 8th Fire, and he's the Algonquin Medicine Man. So check out that stuff. It was great having him as a guest, and we'll ask him to come back again and answer some more of the questions and comments that have been happening. All right. So thank you all for coming. Anything else you want to end with, Jen?
I think that's it. Just so much light and love, guys.
Absolutely. Sending you lots of life.
Yeah.
Have an awesome week. We'll see you soon.
Mm-hmm.